First of all, I want to thank RAPS. When I moved from the Northwest up to Kansas City, I really had no intention of getting re-involved with storytelling. And then there were all these open mics and writers' conferences. And then I found RAPS and I started telling stories. And now I seem to be spending a lot of time. Uh, so RAPS, you've made the my reentry very easy. So thank you for that.
Well,
This first story is a story about a road, a pumpkin, and a silver platter. Once upon a time, there was a road that ran from nothing to nowhere. And as you'd expect for a road that ran from nothing to nowhere, it was rarely used. And when the sun baked the road during the road would amuse itself thinking about tires, big truck tires, little tiny Volkswagen tires, limousines, hearses, good humor man tires. And when the road was desperate, it even thought about skateboard wheels and bicycle tires. But the road was very, very lonely, and all night when the moon and the stars swam through the sky, the road pined with loneliness. One morning it woke up and decided if anything was going to change, it was because it made it change. And so the road started looking and scheming and thinking. Now, at the nothing end of the road, there was a pumpkin patch. And there are two things you need to know about pumpkins. The first, pumpkins are excruciatingly vain. They worry about their shape. Are they too round? Not round enough. They worry about their color. They worry about the curvature of their stem. They even worry about the number of nubbins on the stem. The second thing you need to know about pumpkins, they have legs. Now, I know this sounds preposterous, but pumpkins are very smart, and they know that if we knew they had legs, we would expect them to pluck themselves up out of the pumpkin patch, march into our homes, up to our kitchen counters where we'd chop them up, turn them into pumpkin pie. So they sit tight on those legs. And the pumpkin legs end in the sweetest little feet, caterpillar-like toes. The road kept thinking about those vain, potentially ambulatory pumpkins and a sterling silver platter that had jounced out of one of the few trucks that had ever gone down the road. Early, early in the morning, when the pumpkins were the least defended, the road started its murmuring campaign. Oh, you would look so handsome on a sterling silver platter, with the moonlight pouring down or sunlight on your bright orange bodies. Ah, you would be très distingué. Eventually, one of the more adventuresome pumpkins plucked himself up and walked all the way from nothing to nowhere. Oh, the road was excited, feeling those little tiny pumpkin toes on its back. Oh, and the pumpkin got to the platter and sat down and struck poses. But there was no one to admire it. So it had to walk all the way back down to the pumpkin patch, which of course delighted the road. Got several more pumpkins to join it, and they walked all the way back, and they took turns. One would sit and pose and vogue, and the other two would admire, and they would switch roles. Well, before long, there was a constant stream of vain ambulatory pumpkins going from nothing to nowhere and nowhere to nothing. And the silver platter was very happy because it was well used. And honestly, all that exercise improved the firmness of the pumpkin's flesh. And the road was very happy. So a story that involves a road, a pumpkin, and a silver platter ended very, very well. So I have interesting sound effects.
They're next to it first. That's Cyrus.
So that's just so this next story, honestly, it sounds almost like a tall tale. Unfortunately, it's not. I can vouch for its accuracy. It goes back to some of the misdeeds or foolishnesses, shall we say, of my younger life. I loved going to the library. And one summer, I decided I would read any book that I wanted to. I read a book on head hunting. I still remember photos of these little heads shrunk down to the size of an orange and had really, really long, creepy hair. I never pursued head hunting, but I did read a book on parachuting, and that captured my imagination. The writer was just ecstatic about the quiet that you could experience as you're falling down to earth. I had never read such writing like that, and I was intrigued, and I really wanted to go parachuting, but my parents wouldn't let me. So I had to wait until I was 21. And then, as soon as I was 21, I got myself to the Elsinore Parachuting Center in Elsinore, California, and I signed up. Now, I want to be very clear. This was sport parachuting a long time ago, not to be confused with tandem parachutes. So, with tandems, you're kind of like a little baby koala, and you're attached to this experienced parachutist. And frankly, if there's a fatality, it's their fault. You really don't have to worry about things. This was hardcore out the door. And not to be confused with the parachuting that happened in those World War II movies where all those paratroopers jump up and they hook up and they go out the door. No, 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 no. This was a small airplane. The door was rather small, and you had to bend over to get out. There's something else that's really important. We had to step off with our right foot. I'll explain more about that in a little bit. But I've always had trouble with right and left. I'm the one that goes to the chiropractor, and the chiropractor says, turn over on your left side. And I turn over, and the chiropractor says, now the other left. I have a photo of my feet with blue painter's tape, big L on one foot, big R on the other. It makes yoga easier once the laughter quiets down. So we're in this plane, we're up in the air, and the jump master says, it's time for me to go out the door. Well, remember, I told you it was a little door. You just can't walk out. That would be too simple. And nobody told me about the wind. Now think about it. You're driving 80 miles an hour and you stick your arm out the window and yeah, okay. Well, we were going a little faster than 80 miles an hour. And it felt like the wind had a personal vendetta against me. There's something else I need to tell you.
Okay.
Besides stepping off with the right foot, I had to get out of the airplane and position myself on this little platform that was under the wing of the airplane. And I had to hold on to a wing strut. Okay? So this is a lot because I'm still thinking, oh my goodness, I have to remember my right foot. I have to step off with my right foot. So I get out, I get on the platform. I'm thinking right foot, right foot, right foot. If I step off with my left, I'll crash into the side of the plane. I'm holding on to the wing strut. I didn't hear the jump master when he told me to go the first time. I heard him the second time. And I'm going right foot, right foot. I stepped off with my right foot, nailed that. I forgot to release my hands. So I am hanging from this wing strap at 3,200 feet. The wind is blowing at me and I don't know what to do. Fortunately or not, Mother Nature was up for the problem. My hands finally fell away and I started falling towards Earth. In a couple of seconds, my parachute deployed and I was floating down towards the land in Southern California. Now, the descent wasn't exciting. I've had elevator rides that were actually more exciting. There wasn't that much to see that I couldn't have seen from that damned airplane. And it wasn't noisy. Sorry, it wasn't quiet. It was noisy up there. The parachute. That was the wind moving through the parachute. The airplane. And then I had this radio strapped to my chest, and they were telling me which line to pull on the off chance that maybe I was still conscious and I could follow a different path. So it was kind of a bust. Now, really, the most dangerous part of any jump is the last inch or two. And they informed us we needed to keep our knees bent and we need to keep our eyes on the horizon. So I know I'm getting closer, and the little man in the box is saying, knees bent, eyes on the horizon, knees bent, eyes on the horizon. Kept my knees bent, my eyes were on the horizon. Hit! I stayed upright, gathered up my chute, and that was the jump. Except normally you had to do 10 static line jumps before you could do a free fall. But the jump master informed me that my unorthodox exit kind of reset me to 0. And I had 10 more jumps to do until I could do a free fall. But at that point, I really wasn't interested. Yeah. And looking back on it, I guess, honestly, the best thing I got out of the whole thing was the story that I just told you. So a change of pace Some of you may know the book, The Magic Orange Tree. It's a collection of stories that Diane Volksting collected, published the book quite some time ago. This is a Haitian folktale, and it's the story of Owl. We're pretty rigid in this culture about animals are animals and people are people. But in a lot of cultures, they kind of get all mixed up. And so this is a story that involves Owl, the rooster, a girl, and the girl's mother, and then a bunch of party goers. Owl thought he was ugly. He was so convinced he was ugly, he stayed away from people. But one night, when it was dark, he met a girl. They had a great time talking. Owl went home, and then he thought, if she had seen me in daylight, she wouldn't have liked me. And yet, each evening, Owl went back and visited with the girl. They sat on the porch in the dark, talking politely. And this went on for some time. And then one day, the girl's mother said, I would like to see Owl's face before the wedding. Well, I'll explain this. He works. By the time he gets home and changes and gets over here, it's late. Well, I doubt Owl works on Sunday. We can have a party then. When Owl heard that there was a party in his honor, oh, he was so excited, but he was also afraid. The thought of the girl seeing him in daylight was too much for him. And so he asked Rooster, his cousin, to come to the party with him. And so on Sunday, Owl was on his horse. Rooster was on his horse. And Owl looked over and saw Rooster. And oh, Rooster looked so fine with those flashy feathers and great spiffy clothes. And Owl thought about the girl looking at Rooster and then looking at him. And he felt dreadful shame. I can't do this. And he turned around. But just tell them I had an accident. I hurt my eyes. I can't come until dark. And Owl rode off. So Rooster went to the party. And late at night, when it was dark, Owl came to the party. Psst, he asked one of the fellas, get Rooster. Tell him to come out. So the man got Rooster, and Rooster came out and found Owl, and he looked at Owl, and he said, Owl said, it's a hat. Well, it was this very, very strange hat that was huge, and the rim covered Owl's eyes and his nose and went all the way past his mouth. Rooster said, that is ridiculous. And Owl said, tell them my eyes are very sensitive. Even lamplight hurts them. And so Rooster did. Rooster took Owl around and introduced him to all of the girl's relatives. And then Owl just planned to sit in a chair on the porch. But the girl came and got him. And she said, Owl, we have to dance. And so they went out into the yard and they started to dance. And did Owl ever have moves? He was brilliant. Even with that stupid hat and the story about his eyes, he was amazing to dance with. And the girl, all she could do was keep up with him, throw her head back, and laugh. And so they danced and danced. And then Owl started getting scared because he knew sunlight would be coming. So he ran to Rooster after excusing himself from the girl. And he said, Rooster, you have to watch for sunlight. When it starts to get bright, You have to call out and let me know." And Rooster agreed. So Owl went back and danced with the girl. But then he noticed Rooster wasn't paying any attention. So he excused himself from the girl and ran past the trees, looked at the horizon, and it was still dark. And so he came back and danced more with the girl. And they danced, and then he was going to excuse himself again. And the girl said, "Owl, stay with me." And so he did. And he kept dancing until it all fell apart. Sunlight poured into the yard. The girl's mother tore Owl's hat off and said, "Now we'll see what he looks like." And Rooster was crowing, "Cuck-you-coo, cuck-you-coo." And Owl ran for his horse. And the girl called out, "Owl!" But he had gone. And so she followed him. And as Owl was untying his horse, she saw his face. It was fierce with beauty. It was the most beautiful face she had ever seen. Oh! And he was on his horse and gone. She waited. She waited a long time, but Owl never returned. Eventually, she married Rooster. She never thought of Owl except sometimes early in the morning when Rooster crowed. She'd think about Owl and wonder where he was. Storytellers spend a lot of time finding stories that really aren't worth telling. And I started going through, and I wanted some stories with some serious heft. So I wanted heroic stories, and I started reading The Death of Arthur and the Odyssey, and it's a lot of guys chopping up other guys with swords. And I thought, these are not really stories I want to tell. But then I read a book called The Monuments Men about World War II and men, and there were also some women who were trying to regain the art that had been stolen, looted by the Nazis. And I found a couple of stories that I thought were really worth telling. This is called Splendid Courage. Like the ancient tellers who sing the praises of ancient heroes, I sing the praise of modern men. I sing of men with dazzling hearts and splendid courage. I sing of men who risked bloody wounds, severed limbs, painful death. They fought not for God, glory, and gold. They fought not for land and dominion. They fought for marble and masonry, for columns that shot up high to vaulted ceilings, for windows filled with stained glass, and statues made of the softest limestone. They fought for beauty, not destruction. They fought to protect Chartres Cathedral. Chartres. It came up out of the French ground in the Middle Ages, the epitome and the essence of a different time. Chartres was built in 1220. It witnessed the coronation of a king, the fervor of pilgrims. It blessed the living and gave blessings to the dead. It cradled the sorrowful, and it animated all those who saw it. Spend a day just on the exterior of this building. You are amply rewarded. Stand on the porch. Admire the saints, holy men and holy women in simple garb. Their stance is humble. They radiate goodness. We look at them and their purity makes us shiver. Study the harrowing of souls, where the failed ones are sent to hell. It is a cautionary tale about wasted lives. Walk all the way around the cathedral. Look up, 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 and you'll see windows that house stained glass. Admire the buttresses. Finally, come back to the royal entryway and enter the cathedral. Stand on the labyrinth. This is a portal. It is a space for mystics. Here, in this place, you can feel the river that runs under everything. Kneel. The water raises, anoints your feet. And now it was all to be destroyed. Wartime Europe, 1944. The Americans decided that the German artillery was being directed by soldiers stationed in the towers of Chartres Cathedral, and so they would bomb this building. They would reduce it to rubble. But there was one man who didn't concur with their opinion. Colonel Welburton Griffith, West Point, class of 1925. He wanted to prove the high command wrong. And so he and an enlisted man set out. Now they had to cross German lines. They had to cross the German lines 3 times, each crossing nerve-wracking and easily fatal. Once, twice, thrice, they slipped through, and they made it to the plaza that sits in front of the cathedral, and they went inside. And the cathedral was empty. There were no German soldiers directing artillery, and the colonel had the bells of Chartres ring out, and the clanging peals broadcast wondrous news. The order to bomb Chartres was rescinded. Now, there's much we don't know. I don't know the name of the enlisted man that volunteered to accompany the colonel. And I don't know why they risked what they did. Maybe they had seen such grotesque destruction. Beaches, meadows, roads carpeted with corpses, that they had to try to rebalance the world. Maybe it was a final no to sacrilege, an ardent yes to beauty. But the colonel left no record for his acts. There's no journal entry, no letter. You see, there was no time. Because after the bells pealed, announcing their success, he went right on to the village of Lev, 3.5 kilometers away. And there, he was shot and killed. And there was more bad news. The Germans were swept from Chartres and the surroundings, but their hatred had metastasized and become a plan. There were 22 bombs constructed and planted all around the cathedral. And the cathedral was not safe until those bombs were defused. There was a man, Captain Leonard Herbert. He studied art history in college, and then he enlisted and was trained in demolition. And he volunteered. He volunteered to risk his hands, his eyes, his heart, his very life to dismantle those bombs. Each bomb had to be carefully studied, and then he had to take tools and meticulously defuse it. And he was successful all 22 times. Like ancient tellers who sang the praise of ancient heroes, I sing the praise of modern men. I sing their dazzling hearts, their splendid courage. I sing for those who risk themselves for beauty. I would like to finish with a story. It's one of those stories that we don't really know where it comes from. It's been changed. And of course, I made changes to it. But I found this in a book, and I think it's a really exquisite story. Once upon a time, there was an old woman who lived in a small house at the edge of her village. And she was cleaning her house because she was going to have a party. There was a knock on the door. She said, oh, it's early. She opened the door. Oh, I wasn't expecting you. And Lady Death said, people rarely expect me. The old woman said, well, please come in, sit by the fire, and would you like some tea? And she got tea for Lady Death. And then Lady Death said, now really, it's time to be going. And the woman said, yes, not just quite yet. Now, Lady Death had heard all sorts of excuses and rationales. The woman said, wouldn't you like to sweep? Sweep? I am Lady Death. I don't sweep. Well, the old woman said, I'm having a gathering of friends. And if you've never swept before, you might find it a little bit interesting. It's smooth, rhythmical, and the brushes against the floor make a sweet sound, and I'll just be in the kitchen working. And the old woman left Lady Death in the living room with a broom. Lady Death had never been treated this way in her life. The impertinence of that old lady. But she was curious. So she swept a little more, and pretty soon she'd swept the whole room. And the old woman came out and said, oh, that's lovely. Come into the kitchen. I am Lady Death. I do not cook. The old woman said, you don't have to cook. Here's a knife. Just chop some vegetables. And before long, there was a rhythmic thunk, 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 thunk as the vegetables were being chopped. And then the old woman said, now I need to get dressed. So when somebody comes to the door, just please bring them in, make them feel comfortable. Lady Death said, this is not going to work. But the old woman disappeared, and there was a knock at the door, and muttering, Lady Death walked over and opened the door. Oh, it's nothing to worry about, said Lady Death. Please come in. And so before long, the house was filled, and the old woman had come out with her finest clothes, and it was a wonderful party. There was music, there was good food, great conversation. Lady Death even sat by the fireplace and told the children stories. And some people were still uncomfortable with her presence, but some kind of warmed up to her, and everybody agreed it was a wonderful party. And everyone left, and the old woman said, now I guess it's time to go. Yes, said Lady Death, but not just yet. Oh, you enjoyed the party? Yes, said Lady Death. Well, we can do it again next year. And Lady Death agreed. And the next year, they had a wonderful party. And it happened again. They agreed to have another party the following year. And that year, it was really the best party ever because, well, everyone was pretty comfortable with Lady Death. The kids knew what stories she would tell, and they knew that if they begged her to tell more stories, she would. And the musicians were in fine fettle. And at one point, the musicians started playing soft, lyrical waltz. And Lady Death and the old woman just fell into each other's arms, and they started dancing. It wasn't clear who was leading whom, but they mirrored each other perfectly. And a silence spread throughout the room. People were hard pressed to explain what they were seeing. Oh, but they knew it was very special. And finally, the party came to an end, and the guests left. And Lady Death said, now I think next. No, said the old woman. I can't do this anymore. My body is tired. I understand, said Lady Death. And I need to thank you. The old woman smiled and she said, yes, it's hard being the one that everyone fears. And Lady Death just shook her head. And so the two walked out of the house, down the path, out the gate. They're walking down the road, and the sun is starting to come up. And as the sunshine falls on them, they reach out, take each other's hand, and walk down towards the sunrise.
Ridiculous.